thank you so much for joining me. I'd like to introduce David Boehm, who's Chairman, Co-founder, CEO of Miskawaan Health. Welcome to the podcast.
Thank you, Jonathan. Nice to be here.
Great, David. Listen, why don't you just give me a quick rundown of your origin story, the key moments that got you to where you are today?
Sure. I'm originally from Sydney, Australia. I spent most of my life living in Hong Kong. I'm a chartered accountant, certified public accountant by profession. Most recently, I've been involved in mining ventures and also in hospitality ventures in Asia. And we started Miskawaan Health Group about 7 years ago, basically to offer people a different way of looking at their health. We've got the huge pharmaceutical health complex, which is obviously very powerful globally now, and we're not looking to break that down or to fight with them. We just want to offer something that's complementary and is more aligned to healing people in a more natural way rather than resorting to pharmaceutical drugs. Although we do see there's a lot of benefit in pharmaceutical products in certain cases, but in many cases, we don't just say, here's a symptom, here's a pill, let's give that pill for the symptom. We look at the underlying cause of the disease. So we're just trying to look at a different approach for people's health in this modern world. Okay.
So tell me, what are you currently working on now? What projects, goals is Miskawaan Health looking at? So let's dig a little bit deeper, please.
Sure. We spent the last 7 years or so setting up a platform where we can actually bring plant-based or therapies that are bioidentical to nature directly to humans without having to go through a long, complicated process of laboratory experiments. And the reason we can do that is because they're natural medicines. The worst thing that can happen, generally speaking, is nothing. So we've got this platform we set up now. So we're looking now to develop a number of plant-based medicines which are highly beneficial to humans, particularly in this day and age where there's a lot of toxins around, a lot of various complications to our health. We have a very fast-paced life. We're very stressful, many of us. So we're looking to bring these products firstly to Asia and then to the rest of the world. And the most exciting substance that we're working on at the moment is something called chlorogenic acid, which is extracted from a plant. It's actually extracted from traditional Chinese medicine herbal plant. And that's been proven in very large clinical trials to be highly effective against many different forms of cancer. And we're also using it as a way of preventing cancer, treating disease, and for preventing other diseases. The genius of the product is that it's been developed to support the human immune system. So when it's used for cancer, and the clinical trial, it was used to treat glioblastoma, which is, as you probably know, is a very serious form of brain cancer. And when you're treating glioblastoma, the problem is the blood-brain barrier, and it's hard to get molecules through the blood-brain barrier. So the genius of this product is that it actually doesn't attack the cancer. It supports the immune system to attack the cancer. And so because it's an immune support substance, pretty much whatever's going on in your body, it can help you, and it can help you to recover and maintain good health.
Great. So I'd like to clarify one additional bit. The experts that you're using, when some of the top professors out of Germany, as an example, can you give us a minute on that? Would you mind?
Sure. So our medical director is a guy called Dr. Johannes Wesely. He's the co-founder of the business, and he's what you would call a integrated functional medicine expert, looking at not just the symptoms of someone being ill, but someone looking at the root causes of the reason why the person is ill. We have a number of preeminent scientists, as you mentioned, from Germany, other medical doctors. We have Dr. Tillman Frisch, who's a dentist by profession, but he calls it oral medicine. And for example, he says that the doctors, what their job is to stop people dying, but his job as an oral medicine practitioner is to keep people healthy. Because as he says, more than 80% of human disease is occurring through the oral cavity. And then we've also got a number of experts from Australia, including Dr. Ross Walker, who is a very well-known cardiologist. We have Dr. Charlie Teo, who's a neurosurgeon. And now we've developed a fairly extensive network of experts in China as well. The professor who did the clinical trial for chlorogenic acid, his name is Professor Li Wenbin. He's one of the top neuro-oncologists in the world. He's someone that lectures all around the world on brain cancer. And he's associated with a number of very prominent scientists in China as well. That's now part of our cohort of scientists. We have in our business our own chief scientist, Dr. John Dangerfield, who's a biochemist from the UK, who's studied in Singapore, in Thailand, in Germany, various parts of Asia and the world. So everything we do in our medical business, we adopt a scientific approach. Everything that we offer, there's science to back it up. Chlorogenic acid, for example, there's over 9,000 papers on chlorogenic acid that we found so far. It's not a new substance, but it's something that has been developed into a more effective and concentrated way by our partners in China. And what's interesting, we've seen a big shock in the world tech markets this week with DeepSeek coming out of China and upending the whole AI market. And NVIDIA, I think, dropped almost 20% in one day, then recovered, I think, half the losses, but it's very volatile. And I think that we're now seeing that China is a hotbed of innovation, and the world has not seen, I've seen it because I'm very frequently in China, but the world hasn't seen how much innovation has happened in China, both in the technology area and also in the medical arena as well.
Yeah, thank you. I'm going to sort of, because I've got a bit of personal knowledge to this, the name Miskawaan Health, and part of the unique offering that you have is a property you own called Miskawaan in Koh Samui. Can you give me a short one? And I've stayed there, and I've got to tell you, anybody that's listening, if you want the perfect relaxing break, this is the place to go. But David, just quickly tell me how that wraps into Miskawaan Health.
Yeah, thanks, Jonathan. The Miskawaan luxury villa resort in Koh Samui in Thailand was opened in 2007. The name Miskawaan was selected by a branding company, and it's actually refers to one of the original 4 gardens of Buddha, Lord Buddha. So it's basically a name that elicits a feeling of well-being and peace and harmony as one of the gardens of Buddha. And as you said, it's a beautiful place. The villas are right on the beach, Mae Nam Beach, which was voted one of the top 10 beaches in Southeast Asia. And you have beautiful fresh air, you have beautiful white sand, the best of Thai food. We have our own chefs that cook the food for you. And when you wake up in the morning, you literally fall out of bed onto the beach. It's a very calm and peaceful environment, a great place for a holiday. And we have actually one of our Miskawaan clinics located within the complex of the villas. So you can go there and you can enjoy your vacation and get the treatments at the same time. That's the whole idea. We decided to use the same name for the medical business because my co-founder, Dr. Wesley, had also stayed at Miskawaan and loved his experience there and loved the name. And he said, we really want to use that name in our medical business. And I remember a couple of years ago, we had an investment in our company from a very famous marketing person from the US. His name is Chris Birch. He was one of the co-founders of Tory Burch, the fashion empire. And he didn't like the name and he wanted to change it. And Dr. Wesley said, absolutely, under no circumstances, we're keeping Miskawaan. That's the background of the name, and that's the quick history of the resort.
Okay, great. Thank you. Let's just jump into a bit more CEO-related stuff now, if we can. Yeah, I know you have a very healthy lifestyle. Tell me a bit about your daily habits and routines, and perhaps that you think have helped with your success, and what does a typical day look like?
I'm fortunate to have a very supportive wife. I usually get up in the morning and greet her, and she's from Myanmar and she's a committed Buddhist. So I've adopted the Buddhist way of life. So what I do is get up in the morning after my bathroom break. I generally give some blessings to Buddha. We have a Buddha stand at home. We give breakfast to Buddha, and then we make some prayers and some meditation. I try and do some meditation every morning. And then I like to go and do some exercise, either go for a jog or go to the gym, and then have breakfast. And then I feel I'm ready for the day ahead. Because my running a medical business, as well as the other things going on in my life, I've got 7 children, and I've got 4 grandchildren. So that keeps me very busy. 2 of my grandchildren live here in Bangkok, and they're always very much demanding my time, and I like to spend as much time with them as I can, because they're 5 years old and 2 years old. And those of you who have children or grandchildren will know that's great, a great age, and a great age to spend time with them. So I try and balance up my day I try and finish my formal part of the day by around 6 p.m. And I find that by then I'm pretty tired in terms of my brain gets tired. I'm not a young man, I'm 68 years old. And so I like to entertain in the evening, either friends, family, of course, as I mentioned, and sometimes colleagues and collaborators, and have a nice dinner and a glass of wine or two. So that's my typical day.
Great. I think you've actually answered my next question about how do you balance your personal life and demands of leadership on running a business. So we might skip that. Has there been any particular failure or challenge in your life that has been significant? What did you learn? How did you overcome it? What would you do differently?
Yeah, I think the biggest failure was really in this medical business earlier on. We did pretty well in our first clinic in Thailand in 2018. So we thought we were smart, and we decided to expand, and we opened a very big clinic in Hong Kong, 15,000 square feet, 1,500 square meters. Excuse me, another clinic in Vienna in Austria to support the Russian-speaking market. And then we had these beautiful brand new clinics, doctors, nurses, admin staff, everything ready to go by the end of 2019. And of course, what happened in 2020? COVID came along. And when you have a business that is supported by people who need to travel to come and see you, and the world shuts down, that's a fairly complicated situation. I remember listening to a podcast in the middle of 2020, and it was the head of Carnival Cruise Lines being interviewed. And he said he's been to all the top business schools, he's been to Yale, he's been to Harvard, he's been to Oxford, but no one ever taught him what to do when his revenue goes to zero. And that was a common issue for many businesses at the time. And I had in my wildest dreams, I couldn't imagine that this COVID lockdown would go for any more than a few months to the middle of 2020. And as we all know, it went for much longer than that. So by the second half of 2020, we decided to shut down the clinic in Vienna, which was just as well because the Russian market never came back because of the Ukraine war. And we changed the clinic in Hong Kong to a referral clinic, and we're just actually going to open it up again as a full service clinic in March of this year. But the big lesson I had, and it literally cost this business millions of dollars to firstly expand too quickly, and then not realize quickly enough that the world had changed, and the world had changed permanently, and the kind of things that you expected to happen weren't going to happen. And I think I just wasn't agile enough. I needed someone like yourself to grab me by the shoulders and say, "Are you kidding me? What are you doing? You're keeping these clinics open. You're spending money every month on something that's just not going to happen anytime soon." So I was in I think the whole COVID time, we're all living in like a crazy world, like a dream world, like a fantasy world. But that was for sure my biggest mistake, is not acting quick enough to the new reality. And it was certainly the biggest in terms of losing a lot of money in a business that was at its early stage.
I remember talking to you towards the end of that period, and having said,
I wish we'd talk earlier. You would have brought some sense into me.
No man is an island in that respect, David. It was a difficult time. And it was interesting. I was reading something from Bill Gates yesterday, he is predicting the 10 to 15% chance of another pandemic within the next 5 years. So,
well, Jonathan, our medical director, Dr. Wesley, says without any doubt whatsoever, there'll be another one, and it may be tomorrow. It may be, as Bill Gates says, in the next 5-10 years, but it's going to happen, and it's because we've overtaken the planet, and we're living so close with nature and with animals that we're not used to do in the past. There's lots of new pathogens. We vaccinated in the middle of a pandemic, so we taught these viruses to evolve very quickly. And they're just every scientist I talk to is absolutely convinced. He knows there's going to be another pandemic. But the thing is, we can't afford to shut the world down again.
Mm.
And Dr. Wesley said in March 2020, right before the shutdowns, we had an event here in Bangkok, and we invited one of the princesses of Thailand. So there was a lot of media there. And Dr. Wesley was asked, he said, what do you think of this COVID-19 virus? He said, I don't know much about it, but I know one thing's for sure, we can't afford and we should not shut down the world, because we have these viruses all around us all the time. People forget that influenza, common all day, all garden influenza, killed hundreds of thousands of people every year anyway. And it's never a good thing that people die, but it's the reality of the world we live in. And as we've seen now, the virus is very patient. And if you look at, for example, in China, China had one of the toughest lockdowns. And then in the end, they had to give up because you can't lock down a country forever. And then when they opened up, everybody got COVID. Most people were fine and then just moved on. So there will be another virus, another pandemic. But the critical thing is what we preach as a medical business. You need a good immune system. And the core components of what we do is to support the human immune system. So if your immune system is working well, you can pretty much cover any pathogen, any virus, any bacteria, and do it by yourself using your own mechanism. And as Dr. Wesley likes to say, the best doctor is your own body.
Yeah. Yeah, it's interesting, the school holidays here. Finished next week, thank God. But I'm not sure, my wife came down with influenza A over the last couple of weeks.
All right. I hope they're doing okay.
Yeah, they're okay, but I tell you what, it really knocks you about.
Yeah, the good thing with young kids is that they get sick quickly and they recover quickly. But it's the same. We've had a virus go around in Thailand. My whole family, my whole office, everybody got it, including me. But it affects people in various ways. But we see the people who are not looking after themselves as well as they should, they're much more severely impacted by these kinds of things than a healthy person, as you'd expect.
Yeah. David, what do you think was the best piece of advice you've ever received, and who gave it to you?
Yeah, I think the best piece of advice I ever received was when I was a young man and I was at university time, and I was filling shelves in supermarkets at Woolworths at night. And my dad knew some of the senior executives at Woolworths, and one of these very influential and senior gentlemen at the company at the time, we happened to meet him. He came to the store. I don't even remember his name. Maybe I never even knew it, but I knew he was a senior official at Woolworths. And he said, the best advice I can give you is to plan 5 years ahead. And he said, think about where you'd like to be in 5 years' time, and not just in your business life, but in your personal life, in every aspect of your life. Do you want to be married? Do you want to have children? Do you want to live in another country? Do you want to have your own business? Think about all these things and just plan to where you want to be in 5 years' time. He said 5 years is the ideal period, because if you do it any longer than that, it's very hard to see that far ahead. Anything shorter, it doesn't give you enough time to make that plan and put it into effect. So 5 years he found was the ideal time. And that to me was really the best piece of advice I ever had, both for my life and for business, that really helped me to try and figure out my steps as to where I wanted to be in life. At the time, I knew I wanted to travel. I knew I wanted to be overseas. I didn't know I wanted to live as long as I have. Most of my life, I've lived in Asia now. But that plan put that. And I think the other best advice I got was from my father, who was born in Germany as a Jewish person and had to escape because the Nazis came. And then he lived in the Philippines during World War II and is subject to the Japanese occupation. So he had a bit of a rough time of it, and he never got a formal education. And so he was absolutely insistent for my sister and I to be as educated as much as possible. And I always wanted to leave school and travel and work, but he made sure that I actually went all the way through to get a qualification as a chartered accountant. And I think that's the best piece of advice that anyone can give, is to make sure you get a good education. And if you have children, make sure you give your children a good education, because that's the best foundation you can give for them in life, after all.
Yeah, no, I totally agree. So what do you think has been your biggest learning as a business owner?
The biggest learning?
Yeah.
Yeah, I think the biggest lesson I've learned is that you need to be humble, because I found that you get humbled every day. And being in a medical business, it's especially interesting because by necessity, you have to work with doctors. And doctors generally become doctors because they're the best guys at passing exams, and they get into the top 0.1% of the exam results. And then they go to medical school and they're told that they're the smartest people in the world because they can pass exams very well. So they have a different approach to life. And I can tell you it's very humbling working with doctors every day. But I think that you really have to be prepared to recognize when you're not doing well. Yeah, and that happens a lot. And I think even the top CEOs in the world would admit to that. I think you've got to be absolutely prepared. And this is no secret. All the successful people in the world talk about it. You've got to be prepared to take risks. And you've got to be prepared to stand up for your principles. So we try and run a very ethical business. I think we do. We try and run a very honest business, and I think we do. But that in some ways brings its own challenges. But you've got to learn these lessons, and you've got to be appreciative of the fact that there's a lot of things you don't know. You don't know what you don't know. So you've always got to continually upgrade your knowledge. And I try and put myself into uncomfortable situations on a regular basis, which I think is a good way of learning and a good way of experiencing things that you wouldn't otherwise experience. And it doesn't have to be business related. Things like climbing Mount Kilimanjaro, that was pretty uncomfortable for me.
I remember that. Yep.
But I did it.
Yeah. So I'd like to think you to turn your mind towards your leadership team and leadership teams in the past. What do you think is the most important characteristic of a great leadership team?
Yeah, it's a great question, Jonathan. And I read your emails about this in your business. You send us a lot of emails about the A team. It's very hard to find A people. And I've been lucky in my life. I've had some really good people with me, some really loyal people with me, and many of them are still with me after 30 years of working together. But I think that you've just got to, in some respects, I'm living in a country that is not my home country, so I'm a guest here. And the ways of the people in this country are different from mine. And I think you've got to first respect those cultures and those traditions and the ways of working, and then use the best of the way they work to your advantage, and overcome the issues that help them to overcome the issues that might make them less efficient. I wouldn't say that we've got the best possible team on the planet. I've tried for this business. I really do believe that we need a medically qualified person to be the CEO, and that's not me. And I've been trying to do myself out of a job ever since we started. We've had a number of different CEOs or deputy CEOs, but unfortunately, none of them have worked out. We've just employed a doctor now who I think is a good candidate as a possible CEO. But it's not just the medical qualifications. You need the administrative skills and you need the people skills. And it's so hard to find that in one person. It's a constant search, a constant issue, a constant battle. But I think that the team we have here are highly competent, and I just try and nurture that competency as best as I can. And I'm very open to criticism. I want to hear what's going on, both positive and negative, and to do things that not necessarily directly related to the business. And I'll give you an example. This morning, we had a Buddhist ceremony here in our office. We had 5 Buddhist monks come, and that's basically to give a New Year blessing to the company, to bring in good spirits and ward off the bad spirits. And that's very important to most of my colleagues, and most of them are Buddhists. Most people in Thailand are Buddhists. So that's something that's very important to them. And it happens to be to me too, because I became Buddhist as well. But for those of us, my Western colleagues here, it's not important to them at all because that's not their culture. But because we're in Thailand, it is the culture of most of our colleagues. That's something that's absolutely critical, and we can't ignore it. And that's a good example to me of adapting to the culture in which you're in.
Thank you.
I hope that answers your question.
Look, it did, because you and I have spoken at different times about different leaders in your business, one of the CEOs, etc. And I think the balance that you have to deal with from a leadership perspective, not only culturally, as in different countries, multicultural, literally German medical practitioners, Thai nationals, Chinese nationals, Hong Kong nationals. It's complicated.
It is.
Yeah,
it is.
It's
And what may be normal for one culture may be offensive to another. And you might not even know that just simple things like when you go to a Chinese banquet in China, normally each person has 2 sets of chopsticks. And one set of chopsticks is to pick up the food from the shared plate, put it on your plate, and then you use the personal chopsticks to eat it. Woe betide you if you use your personal chopstick to pick up some food on the table, because it's an offense. Or not an offense, but it's potentially offensive to your Chinese hosts. You could do that quite innocently without even knowing. You have to be mindful of local culture and adapt to them, because if we're in Australia, we're pretty happy-go-lucky. Nothing much worries us. And we haven't got a culture that goes back thousands of years like the Chinese do. So maybe it's easier. Things like Americans are very informal and they're likely to meet you and you're Jonathan right away. If you go to England, you're going to be Mr. Herps. Even within our own Anglo-Saxon culture, there's differences. And we should be aware of that.
I'm going to tell you a story because I think you were there. The kids and I and my wife and the family, this last couple of weeks, we did a road trip to Noosa and back.
Okay.
And stopped and saw friends and things on the way, because I believe in creating memories and experiences. So the kids' Christmas present this year was New Year's Eve at SeaWorld and 3 nights at SeaWorld.
Oh, wow.
So it's fun. I bought a book about games to play in the car, and one of them was your most memorable meal. Now, I think you were there, but I'm not totally sure. But many years ago in Hong Kong, Joseph Chang, I think you know Joseph Chang, took myself and my then partner for dinner at a wonderful Chinese restaurant on Kowloon side. And we were served, so the question, the game was, what was your most memorable meal?
Right.
My answer was a 1,000-year-old egg. Being served a 1,000-year-old egg. And for those who've never heard of that, that is, you'll explain it better than me, but it's an egg, and in the egg is, and it's purple, the yolk, and in the yolk is a fully formed chicken fetus, beak, feathers, the works. And the look on my partner's face at the time was, but as you say, culturally, and that's an absolute delicacy.
I hope she ate the 1,000-year-old egg, because it would have been offensive if she hadn't.
I certainly did. Anyway,
they're not I wouldn't say it's a taste sensation, but
no.
Once,
Yeah, no, not in any way, shape, or form. So listen, tell me about resources or tools you might recommend. The books, podcasts, the tools that have been game changers for you. Any resources that you'd recommend that business owners, CEOs would check out?
Yeah, you've got to keep learning, as I said. Life is busy at the moment, so I don't read books as much as I would like to. My eldest daughter gives me great books about life and educating yourself about life and the world. And they need to be read, but they haven't been yet. So what I tend to do these days is I listen to podcasts, because when for example, I'm in the gym, I can multitask and do my weights and listen to the podcast. And probably, naturally, I listen to health podcasts. I listen to health podcasts from the ABC, from the BBC, from the USA, from Germany, from China. So I'm very focused on health, running a medical business. But I find that the best podcast on a daily basis is the Intelligence from The Economist. And they just have a few stories each day which are very relevant, very pertinent, and it gives you a good understanding as to what's going on in the world on any particular day. I try and keep up. There's so much out there right now. It's very hard to pin down, what's useful. Where do you get your news from? There's a lot of talk about the bias of mainstream media. I remember when you and I were growing up, you'd get the Sydney Morning Herald, and it would be a very balanced newspaper. And you could see both sides of the story. You could see the viewpoint of both sides. And now I would say most people view the Sydney Morning Herald, what's left of it, as somewhat of a left-leaning paper, and the Australian, its competitor, as a right-leaning paper. So we never used to have that before. We'd have general news. So it makes it much more difficult, especially for young people, to navigate what's real and what's not. I was listening to a podcast this morning talking about how there's companies that influence the news. And so you may think that you're listening to real news, but it's actually news that's been created to serve one agenda or another. And so I try and stick to podcasts that are just giving factual information about the day's events or about the things I'm interested in, such as medicine, health, fitness, and that kind of thing. Because it's just so hard otherwise to know what's real and what's not.
That's a very fair point. I'm going to ask you something out of my perspective. When we've traveled in the past, because you travel to multiple countries, so this is a travel-related tool question. How many phones are you running around with at the moment?
How many phones?
Yeah.
Yeah, you caught me out. I've actually got 3 phones sitting on my desk right here.
Yeah.
I know it sounds silly, but I've got one phone. My main phone is my Hong Kong phone. I have which is also my WhatsApp. I have a Singapore phone because I use that a lot for my Singapore businesses. And it's not as active, but it is used by a number of people. And then I have a local Thai mobile phone for people who want to just call me domestically when I'm in Thailand. It's unnecessary and it's complicated, and I have to remember to charge each one of them. And I wouldn't recommend it. I think if you can keep your life simple down to one phone, I'll definitely do that. And most times your internet or your telephone provider can give you a data roaming plan to allow you to roam in different countries. But the scary thing to me, though, just to show how much of a world we live in terms of electronics, is that you can go anywhere in the world and you can turn on your phone and your phone knows where it is. It just connects immediately to the local network. And that's scary to me because it just means that we're followed wherever we go. I think it's interesting to learn that in New York, when that CEO of the healthcare company was shot dead, they pointed out that the average New Yorker gets photographed or videoed 200 times per day. And imagine what it might be like in places like China. So I think we just have to assume that even if we have several cell phones and different ways of communicating, that everybody knows everything all the time. And if you assume that, you're probably not wrong.
Yeah, no, it's just one of those ones that I remember. And when I was living in the Middle East, I had the 2 phones as well.
Yeah.
So I don't know how much has improved, but the concept of having a dual SIM phone just never worked.
Yeah, I think it maybe worked better now, but I haven't figured it out myself.
So listen, any parting words or advice for business owners who are looking to grow?
It's a fact that most new businesses will fail. And I think that again, this is nothing new. I think you have to be sure that when you start a business, you're not afraid of failure. If you don't take risks, then if you're not prepared to take risks, then you're not prepared to fail. And I think that any entrepreneur is going to experience failure in their life. Even the most successful entrepreneurs have failed, and probably multiple times. And that's fine, as long as you have a way to pick yourself up and get yourself back. So don't be afraid to fail. I think one of the things that I haven't done well enough in the past is do the research before. I'm much more of an impetuous person, much more impulsive, and I probably don't do enough research. Don't be like me. Do your research. And as you always constantly say, Jonathan, find the best people that you possibly can to be around you. But you've got to give people a chance and you've got to trust people. But one thing I've found is that if people betray your trust in any way, it's better to let that be the end of the line for that relationship, because I've tried to rehabilitate relationships in the past and it's never worked. People get on and people don't get on. So you can't get on with everybody. And when it doesn't work, don't try and salvage a situation just because you think they're a great person or they're a great manager or whatever. Just let it be and move on. And I think that's something that many of us find it hard to do, including myself in the past. But every situation where I've tried to salvage a situation when it comes to working with an individual or a company or a collaborator, if that trust is lost, then it's the end of the relationship and let it be.
Yeah, no, that's very good advice. Now, I'll put your contact details and the like in the show notes.
Thank you.
I'm just thinking about people who want to contact Miskawaan Health, and where's the best place to go? To the website?
Yes, we have a website, which is www.miskawaanhealth.com. And if you put that up in the show notes, people can see the spelling of that. We don't have any Australian-based clinics at the moment. We hope to in the future. We're working with a group in Singapore who wants to set up 50 Miskawaan branded clinics around Southeast Asia and Australasia in the next few years. We're working with one of the biggest hotel groups in the world to put our clinics in their properties globally. So there should be more immediate access to people from Australia. We have a lot of Australian clients coming up from Australia to our places in Thailand because we do very well with the diseases that modern medicine does not do so well with, which is mainly conditions arising from viruses. So things like autoimmune conditions, long COVID, and we're more than happy to do an online consultation. One of our doctors can meet you online first, talk to you and see what's going on with you. Usually that first consultation is at no cost to the customer. And then you can decide if it's right for you to come up and get some treatments.
Great. And another one of my concepts is working on the business rather than in the business. So if you have health issues, working on it, you could do far worse than doing a trip up to Bangkok and preferably along to Miskawaan and Koh Samui as well. David, thanks so much for taking the time. I really appreciate it.
Thanks, Jonathan. Nice to see you again.